Hi everyone! If you're a beginner colorist and if sometimes you want to expand your horizons and to start using acrylic paint in your coloring, but maybe you're a little bit afraid, I hope that in this video you will find some helpful advice and hints and you finally will start to use this wonderful medium, very helpful in coloring. I own several sets of acrylic paint. Some of them are of professional quality and some of them are of student grade, and I'm quite sure that now it's quite easy to find sets or individual paints from, from different brands and from quite moderate price and of quite decent quality. The most important thing which you need to know about your acrylic paint is opacity. As we don't hang our paintings on the walls, light fastness of the paint, which is very important for professional artists, for us isn't so important, but opacity is extremely important. Here I have swatches of all my sets from all brands which I own, and I highly recommend to do swatches because quite often color of the paint on the package don't really match color inside of the tube. And we can see that even on professional paints like Italian brand Memory, we have quite a big difference between what I have on the tube and what I have on the paper. So advice is do your swatches. Apart from the brand's name and paint's name, I always indicate opacity. Every decent manufacturer, both on student grade paint and on professional paints, always indicate opacity. We can find this information on the tube, on the package, and here we have semi-opaque, this one, then the middle one is transparent, and the last one is opaque. Here I have my lovely Amsterdam acrylic. Manufacturer is Royal Talent, and you can see difference on the paper. Naples yellow is opaque and gold yellow is opaque. Permanent violet is transparent and difference is quite visible. Transparent acrylic is similar to watercolors. You can do glazing, but it will be difficult to get a nice plain solid background. Also, quality of the paint is important. Here I have examples of a very cheap Ukrainian acrylic paint, and you can see that paint here wasn't very pigmented and quite creamy. It's thin, and with such low quality paint you will get not plain solid background. Brush strokes will be visible, background will be streaky, and it's not because you don't know how to apply paint to the paper. It was because you have not very good paints, so quality is important. For acrylic paint, I recommend to use synthetic brushes, and you will need brushes of different sizes and different forms. I recommend to use at least couple of sizes of flat brushes and couple of sizes of round brushes. Also, it will be very helpful to have one very small brush for details and for coloring things like hair or fur or grass. And I hope to show you the importance of brushes when I will be showing you process of my coloring. For some time I was quite afraid to use acrylic paints in coloring books. I knew all their advantages, that from some points they are even easier to use than colored pencils, but still I was afraid. And then At one moment I realized that I purchased quite some nice acrylic paint and they are laying in the box. I didn't touch them, and you know that acrylic paint dries quite quickly. So there was a possibility that all my beautiful, professional, bright paints will be completely dry and I won't be using them at all. I realized that it's a shame. I have to use my beautiful art supplies. There are a lot of coloring books where I don't like backgrounds. If I have a background where clouds or sun are indicated with very thick lines, I always want to cover them. I prefer to do my colorings in more painting way, more similar to real paintings, and that's why I prefer to draw clouds by myself. I don't want clouds to look like they are from childish books with black thick edges, and that's why sometimes I really need opaque paint to cover all black lines, and there where acrylic paint is very helpful. Another reason is that I can use acrylic paint for the background and for coloring in coloring books where paper is thin and where it won't be possible to work with watercolors because acrylic are liquid. I don't need water to use, so they are less demanding to the paper quality. Also, sometimes the style of the picture which I want to do requires plain background in one color or with gradient of colors, but without watercolor stains. Sometimes watercolor background just doesn't suit the style of the picture as I see it. You know that I prefer to do simple colorful backgrounds in the books like Sagar or Zachner, and I don't think that watercolor will be good for these pictures. It's in my opinion and in my style of coloring. So acrylic paint is much more preferable for me in several books. Here I have perfect example of the page where I can practice my coloring skills with acrylic paint. It has thick black lines which I definitely want to cover. I can see this picture in style more like a real painting, so I want to delete all black lines. And with colored pencils, I think that I would spend considerable amount of time coloring the whole background and the pine tree, so it will be much quicker to color with paints. I think that everyone has a list of pictures which are nice but quite difficult to color with colored pencils. Maybe they have huge empty backgrounds or big objects which are quite long to cover with colored pencils, and such pictures would be a great start for practicing using acrylic paints. Let me mention some precautions when you work with acrylic paints. You know that acrylic paints dry very quickly on the air, so first, don't leave your tubes open for a long time. Next, don't press big amount of the paint on your palette, especially if you know that you will need only small amount to color only small area. You won't be able to put your paint back in the tube, and also on the air it will dry very quickly. And that's why I use for mixing my acrylic not my regular palette but plastic lids from cups, so something expandable and cheap. Also remember that you have to clean your brushes immediately when you finished to work with them. As acrylic paint are quite thick and creamy, it sticks quite nice to the brush, so it's it won't be enough just to rinse your brush into the water and to dry it. You will need to wash it quite thoroughly, and I prefer to clean my brushes with soap. When I just started, I wasn't very careful, and I hadn't realized that thick paint is still gathered inside of my brushes, even if I rinsed it couple of times with water. So after that I started to clean it with soap. I started to color background on my picture. For the background I mixed Naples yellow green, warm gray and gray green from different manufacturers, so I wanted this background to be in quite calm colors. When you cover background and if you want brush strokes to be visible, the size of the brush is quite important. If the size of the picture allows, use bigger brush. With bigger brush, you will have less visible pencil strokes. If you would color big background with small brush, you will definitely get a less plain, less solid background color. Here I colored in bigger areas with my big flat brush, but when I go closer to the objects, I switched to smaller brush. And when you color around objects, you have to be quite precise and careful. It won't be look very good if you can't go close to the object and if you will leave some uncolored area around bear or around trunk tree in some kind of white halo around main objects. So it's much better to slightly go inside object and to cover with your paint black lines than to leave this white uncolored halo. I am not afraid that I touched with my green paint some areas on the bear. Acrylic paint is opaque, so with the layer of brown paint I will be easily covering all areas where I slightly went with background paint into the area of the bear. If I use acrylic paint of decent quality, which is still fresh and creamy and opaque, it's quite easy to get this background without visible pencil strokes and to cover all black lines which I want to cover and to hide somehow. I think that acrylic paint has a lot of advantages which could be really helpful even for beginners. Unlike colored pencils, we don't need to purchase a lot of colors. We definitely don't need to purchase 120 tubes. We can mix a lot of colors, a lot of color hues from considerably smaller sets like 12 or 24 colors. As I said, acrylic paint is much less demanding to the paper quality. I was able to use acrylic paint on very thin paper. Just use the paint directly from the tube and don't add water. Another advantage of acrylic paint is that they are very forgiving for beginners. You can easily correct your mistake because paints are opaque. If you want to change color from red to blue, from black to white, with colored pencils it won't be quite easy. And with opaque acrylic paint you can simply apply second layer of the paint and it will cover your mistake completely. And I think that for beginners it's much easier when you can work first with dark colors and then with light colors on top of them. When you color with colored pencils, we have to work from light to dark. We have to think where will be our light areas and to left these areas uncolored. That's why we have to use sometimes white pen to indicate highlights, For me, for example, it's quite difficult to draw animals which have an inner part of the fur of darker color and very light tips of fur. And it's very often thing for animals. With colored pencils it's really hard. And with acrylic paint, when you first could do a layer of dark paint and then to do a layer of light paint, it's much easier to color. I hope that you understood and that I was able to explain. I'm really sorry if I babbled a little bit. For example, here I want to color bark of the tree with dark brown color, and then with a lighter color I can add a little bit of texture, just some lines, some highlighted areas. And it's quite easy, I can apply light paint on top of dark. With colored pencils it's impossible. I can't cover the whole tree with dark umber, for example, and then if I try to apply beige or any other light color, it just won't be visible. So for me it's more difficult to work from light to dark, especially when you need to color dark object. You can use acrylic paint in two ways. For example, here I don't use any water apart from cleaning my brush when I finished to use color. I took paint directly from the tube and it's thick and creamy. And in the end, my picture will be similar to a real painting. You know that oil paintings where brush strokes and thick layer of paint is visible, and that's the look of my picture which I want to get. But I also can use my acrylic paint in a way similar to the watercolors. I can use transparent paints, or I can thin my paint with water or with special paint thinner available from many manufacturers, and in this way paint will become more transparent. I will be able to do glazing, to apply multiple layers of transparent paint, and also in this way I can do a very nice underpaint and then to work on the details with colored pencils. I forgot to mention one disadvantage of acrylic paints for beginners, or maybe it's not disadvantage but difficulty. As I said, you can mix different beautiful colors just from a basic set of paints, but you have to carefully calculate how much paint you will need to cover the whole area where you want to use this color. It's really difficult to mix exactly the same color hue second time. Imagine if you mixed beautiful skin tone, maybe from 2 or even 3 tubes, 3 colors, and it wasn't enough to color the whole face. It will be extremely difficult to mix exactly the same colors, even from the same tubes. It's very difficult to calculate amount of paint in the mix. So you have to feel how much paint you will need. From other hand, you don't want to waste your paint and to mix too many paints, but you will get this feeling with experience. Maybe when you are just a beginner, don't do very difficult mixes from many paints. Try to use clear colors from the tubes, and then with experience you will be able to mix your paints better. When I work with acrylic paint, I use totally different color process compared to coloring with colored pencils. When I color with colored pencils, I can select an object on the picture and to color it from the beginning to the 100% completion, and only then to work on other objects, other areas of the picture. And with acrylic paint, I prefer to do first layer on all objects, then to apply more details to all of the objects, so I work on the whole area of the picture. On the screen you can see that I started to color pine cones. I switched to small round brush. I did first layer with dark umber and then I draw smaller details with warm gray color. So again I work with light paint on top of the dark, and it's very comfortable. When I talked to several beginner colorists, I noticed their quite common mistake. They tried to get a lighter shade of paint, trying to thinner paint with water, just like we get a lighter color with watercolors. But with acrylic paint, you don't use water for getting a lighter shade. You need to mix your paint with white, not with water. To get darker shade, I prefer to mix basic color with Payne's Gray from one of my sets. I tend to not use water at all, only when I need to cleanse my brushes. I prefer to work with thick creamy paints directly from tubes. Here I mixed a little bit of Payne's Gray into the dark brown paint, and I did a shadow areas on the tree trunk. Next thing, brushes are important. I wouldn't recommend to use natural brushes like squirrel. They are too soft and too fragile. With thick acrylic paint, they will wear off quite quickly. And I also wouldn't recommend to use very hard brushes. With hard brushes, your brush strokes will be quite visible. So I used soft synthetic brushes, and I use quite a cheap set from Amazon. I will leave you a link in the info box. I would recommend to own at least a couple of sizes for round brushes, couple of sizes of flat brushes, one small brush like 0 or 00 for hair, fur and grass. I also love my Filbert Grainer brush, very helpful for fur, hair. It's a special flat brush, which very helpful to draw texture. Here I will be using it to draw pine needles. And first I use olive green as a basic color, and then I mix a little bit of pale yellow and into it, and in this way I get a slightly different hues of green and add additional colors to the pine needles. There are a lot of very fun techniques of painting with acrylic paint when you load your brush with two colors, and in this way you get beautiful color gradients. Maybe in the next video for beginners I will try to show you this technique. The last thing I wanted to mention is that I am still a beginner and sometimes I am not very confident to proceed coloring some small details or to add some texture to the objects, and it's perfectly well. I can do an underpaint with acrylic paints just like I did on this page. I am not very confident to draw details of the tree bark or to color the whole bear, and insist, but I can do an underpaint with acrylic paint and then to draw details with regular color pencils on top of it. From my experience, colored pencils lay quite decently on the layer of acrylic paint. I don't like to use Prismacolors on top of the acrylic paint, but with polychromos or color softs, it's quite easy to add more contrast or more details to your painting. So if you don't feel quite confident to color the whole page with acrylic, just use it for the bigger areas, for the underpaint, and then proceed to work with your colored pencils. I hope that this video will inspire you to try using acrylic paint. There is nothing to be afraid. All mistakes can be easily corrected. You can choose simple picture with big objects, not from your favorite coloring book. Coloring with acrylic is quite quick, and imagine how easy you will be able to fill in big empty backgrounds. And also sometimes I feel sad when I use the same set of pencils on many pictures. They started to look the same, and I really get bored from the same set of pencils from the same colors, even if they are 150 in the set. And that's why I love to switch to totally different mediums from time to time. It really helps me to get a nice push of inspiration. I believe that using acrylic paint, at least for the backgrounds, really helps to improve your pictures, extend your possibilities, and in the end, your coloring will look more professional and more similar to the real paintings. I thank you for watching and for listening. I hope that I hadn't made too many English mistakes, and I hope that you will try using acrylics.